Hey everyone, I'm the Pixel Pathfinder. As we move into 2025 in a new year, it's time to reflect back on the previous year, and that's why I'm bringing you my top 10 games of 2024. To qualify for this list, a game had to come out between December 2023 through the end of November 2024. I don't like to include December of the year in these lists because I usually don't have time to play games that came out in December enough to evaluate them and properly put them on a list like this. Also, any game that either just released in early access, or graduated from early access to a 1.0 launch will qualify for this list as well. For these reasons, Path of Exile 2 is not going to be on this list. It did release in December, and I know it's a big release that I was hyped about, but it'll qualify for the list next year, so we'll see how it does. All right, let's get in and start with number 10, which is The Bazaar. The Bazaar launched into early access in November, and it was one of my most anticipated games of the year, right up there along with Path of Exile 2. When it first came out, I played it a ton, and I had a lot of fun. However, I feel that in the current state it's in, it's not the game that I want it to be. But there's so much potential. I can see the potential. The problem right now with The Bazaar is that it was billed as a game where you draft, and you have this roguelike run mode, and it's hard to force meta builds. However, it's incredibly easy to force meta builds, and every time they do a balance patch for the game, more meta builds rise to the top. So I don't think they've quite got it figured out, and for that reason, it's not actually that fun for me to play after the initial sort of fun that I had when it first came out. But it has so much potential, and then I think if they nail it and get it right, it'll be one of my favorite games of all time. And for that reason, it makes the list at the very bottom spot. Moving on to number 9, we've got Chrono Arc. So Chrono Arc is a deck building game that's been in early access for a few years. I picked it up when it first came out, tried it out, and was like, this seems pretty good. I'll wait and see what they do with it. Well, fast forward to 2024, we get the 1.0 launch, we get a couple of DLCs and things like that, and I jumped back into the game to try it out, and it was really fun. The deck building mechanics are great, and on top of that, there are a ton of characters, all anime styled, to play as, which is great for variety and different team builds and combinations and all that kind of good stuff. It's got all that kind of, machinery that I really like in a game like this. And not only did I enjoy playing it after the 1.0 launch, but I'm looking forward to playing more of it in 2025. And so having a good experience all around and wanting to continue to play it is what got it onto this list. Moving on to number 8, we have Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. I got into this game because I liked the previous game from Owlcat Studios, who are the creators of Rogue Trader. That game was Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, and it's great. It's one of my favorite CRPGs of all time. I definitely like it better than Rogue Trader, but it's a pretty high bar to meet. And that being said, Rogue Trader was actually a lot of fun. This is the only game from December 2023 that made it onto this list, by the way. Rogue Trader, I got to play a lot at the beginning of the year, and then I didn't get to play mini games throughout the middle of the year for about 6 months or so. And I haven't been able to go back and revisit Rogue Trader, but I want to. I think I'm going to wait for some more DLCs to come out and then pick it back up and start a new campaign. So I'm really looking forward to doing that, hopefully in 2025. Either way, it's a great game that I put a ton of time into already, and for that reason, it made the list. Moving on to number 7, we have Zenless Zone Zero. Now, 2 months ago, this game would not have made this list. Not because it's a bad game, just because something else would have beat it out. Zenless Zone Zero is a action combat gacha game from MiHoYo, who are the creators of Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. And it's a pretty solid game. It came out this year. I played it for a couple of months, and then I actually ended up dropping the game because I was just playing too many gacha games and I just couldn't keep up with them all. And I thought that I was done with Zenless Zone Zero for good. However, the most recent patch, 1.4 that came out, released the character Hoshimi Miyabi, who was the character I was the most excited about when I played through the original storylines for the game. And that patch came out. I jumped back in. I got Miyabi, played with her. She's freaking awesome to play as, so that made it fun. But that's not actually what got Zenless Zone Zero on this list. What got Zenless Zone Zero on this list was when I was playing catch up and I played through the patch 1.2 story content, Tour de Inferno, which is about a biker gang out in the desert full of flames and motorcycles and guts. And honestly, the story was so awesome. It was so cool. It's one of the few moments this year in gaming where I was like jumping out of my seat, hyped as hell about what was happening in the game, and just like, oh my gosh, like I was telling my friends like, yo, they killed it. And really, that moment and looking back on that is what got this game on the list. It was super awesome, and I highly recommend, you know, if you jump in, you want to play it free to play, not spend a dime and go through this story, I'm telling you, Tour de Inferno was super cool, super worth it. Moving on to number 6, we have Enshrouded. So Enshrouded is a game that came out at a Next Fest last year, I think. I think it had some demos. I think it went into early access. It got its 1.0 this year. And honestly, everybody was excited about it, but I just like didn't want to play it. And then I saw a video, I think it was from Force Gaming, I want to say, where he was talking about the big patch update that they put in around fall of this year and all the different things it allowed you to do. And I kind of looked at it and went, that looks kind of cool. So Enshrouded is like a survival crafting PvE style game that you can play with friends. And it looked like the kind of game that I could hop on and I could play with my wife. And so that's what we did. We both got a copy. We hopped into Enshrouded. We had a lot of fun. Admittedly, I did not play as much as she did, but it's fun enough that I know I'll go back and I'll play it when there's another patch or when we just want something to play together. It was really good, really fun experience, very well put together. I highly recommend it if you're looking for a game like that. Moving on to number 5, we got Dyson Fold. I've talked about this on several videos. I've put out gameplay footage for this game as well. This is like my off-brand indie gem of the year, I guess. You know, there's lots of indie games on this list that I think are kind of like bigger and more well-known. This is kind of the niche indie pick for me of the year. Dyson Fold is just super fun. There's a ton of characters. I really like the mechanics. It's really easy to just like kick back and play this game. It doesn't feel like you have to be super heavily invested. It's not like quite so chill that you can turn your brain off because you still need to like do the dice combinations and stuff like that. But it's just like a relaxing, easy game to play. I love the look of it. I love the fantasy setting, obviously, because I'm a fantasy dork over here. But it's just been one of the big surprises for me for the year with just how much I've really enjoyed it. So it had to make the list. Moving on to number 4, another game that I wasn't sure would like make this list. This wasn't even on my radar, but this is Romancing Saga 2, Revenge of the Seven. So Romancing Saga 2 was a Super Nintendo game that got a remaster, so they updated the graphics and all that kind of stuff, and then it got a full-blown remake. This is a game published by Square Enix from the Romancing Saga series, but Revenge of the Seven is just so good. I've downloaded and played a ton of demos, and let me tell you something, with JRPGs, I have such a problem because they come up against their arch nemesis whenever I'm playing, and that arch nemesis is a nap because it's like I'll play the game, but am I gonna make it? Am I gonna make it more than like an hour before I'm passed out in my chair from playing? And Romancing Saga, the demo not only kept me entertained, I played the entire thing and was like, I want to play more. So why is this game different? Well, one, it's pretty slim on the story. So, you know, don't play this game for the story. However, you play it for the mechanics. It has a lot of really cool things that I really enjoy. So first off, you know, when you're playing in combat, you've got your characters that are equipped with multiple weapons. They can have 2 weapons apiece. They got their armor sets, accessories, that kind of stuff. They can learn skills, they can learn spells. And so when you're attacking the enemy, enemies have different weaknesses that you have to figure out. Maybe they're weak to fire, maybe they're weak to axes, that kind of stuff. So it gives you reason to kind of test out your different moves and not just spam your best attack over and over and over again. There's also a glimmer system where if you use particular skills, there's a chance that your character will just randomly learn a new skill. So that's another reason to diversify the skills that you're using in combat. So I really like that because I feel like a lot of JRPGs kind of boil down to like use your strongest attack over and over and over and over. And this game gives you multiple reasons to use different abilities and to diversify not only the skills you're using, but the different types of classes and the different types of weapons you're using across your entire team. But then on top of that, it's got like a kingdom building element. It's kind of light from what I can tell so far, but you do kind of like build some new things for your town. You know, you do like a blacksmith, you do like a research institute for spells and stuff like that. And then it's got this really interesting like inheritance mechanic. You play as an emperor, and what happens is when your emperor dies, or when there's a time skip in the game, you have to choose a new emperor. And so what happens is that new emperor inherits all the abilities from your previous emperor. And I say when your emperor dies, that's interesting too. Each character has a certain amount of life points. And when they go down in combat, they lose a life point. And then if they run out of all their life points, they perma-die. So it's got permadeath, except it's not like as soon as you die, you're dead. So if your emperor loses all their life points, you have to pick a new emperor. If time passes, you pick a new emperor. And then also, if you do a party wipe, if your whole party wipes, you not only have to replace the emperor, but your entire party as well. So it's like a way that you can sort of like fail forward. And what happens is as your characters learn skills and abilities, your empire increases its knowledge. So like the more you use spears, for example, the higher the knowledge of spears you'll have for your empire. So when you hire or recruit a new spearman, you'll be able to automatically teach them some of the skills that you've learned on your previous characters. It's just all like a really good system. I could sit here and talk about it more, but I think I've kind of covered the things that might get you hooked or interested in the game if you're really into it. And honestly, it made the top 4. So that's really impressive. Coming out of nowhere, a game I didn't even know was going to come out or wasn't even on my radar at all. So that brings us to number 3, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, the other JRPG that made my list, and it made the top 3. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink is a game that honestly is just a blast to play. It looks gorgeous. It has a variety of characters. It has a really good combat system. So kind of take a JRPG, take Monster Hunter, smash them together. That's kind of what you get with Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. Basically, you have a set of characters in your party, and you play as one of them. Okay, you play as that character, and then your other characters kind of help you out via AI. But you can unlock more characters, and each character has an incredibly distinct fighting style, like super different from the other characters. So you can find one or a couple different characters that you really like the play style of, and then you go out, you do the storyline, and then afterwards, when you beat the story, you do lobby-based sort of missions and boss fights with other players, a la Monster Hunter. And it's honestly just a ton of fun. And this is the other game on this list, along with Zenless Zone Zero, that had not just one, but several moments throughout the campaign, which I actually have not quite finished yet, that made me just go, oh my gosh, that was so cool. Like, holy cow, that was epic. Like, there's not a lot of games that hit me like that anymore. And the fact that I got 2 of them this year is crazy. And so all that put together makes Grand Blue Fantasy Relink a game that not only do I think is super awesome, but one that I fully intend to continue playing into the future. And that's got it at that number 3 spot. Moving on to number 2. So I thought the interesting thing to do here would be to put my number 1 game in the number 1 spot and put the number 1 game that I like to play with my wife in the number 2 spot, right? And so that's what I did. So number 2 here is Core Keeper. Core Keeper is a game that launched into early access, I want to say in 2023, but it had its 1.0 launch in 2024. And let me tell you, this game is good. It is so good. You are missing out if you are not playing Core Keeper. I mean, I really don't know what else to tell you. Like, I don't like this kind of game typically. The game is very much something in the vein of like Stardew Valley, where you have like a base that you're setting up, you want to build things, you want to go out and gather, you want to craft things, you want to fight enemies, you want to explore, you know, all that kind of stuff that typically I'm not that into. Like, I try to play and I'm not that into, and I don't know what it is about Core Keeper. It's so polished. The gathering feels so good. The combat is great. It's a game you can play with up to 8 different people. The boss fights are epic. The atmosphere that the game creates is just super immersive. And it's so easy for me to get into Core Keeper and just play it for 8 hours. Straight. It's like so hard not to get sucked in and want to keep playing this game. And honestly, for a game in this genre to do that for me is almost unheard of. The only game that's ever come close is Astroneer, and that's a game I hold in very high regard as well. So Core Keeper for me is just a smash hit of 2024. So then that brings us to my number 1 game for 2024, which is a little bit of a surprise to me, but honestly, not really. And that game is Last Epoch. So Last Epoch is a ARPG in the vein of Path of Exile or the Diablo games that's been in early access for a little while and had its 1.0 launch in 2024. When the 1.0 launch came out, I think I played for like 100 hours. Not straight, but pretty darn close to straight. And I got to the end game. I did some of the end game stuff. And even though this is the 1.0 launch, it's kind of 1.0 in the same way Path of Exile or Diablo is 1.0, because they're going to continue to add more and more features as they continue to release more and more seasons or leagues or whatever you want to call them. And so really the only reason I stopped playing Last Epoch when I did is because, well, they just have a longer period of time between their seasons or leagues or whatever they call them. And so I kind of played through all the content there was, and they've really kind of been working over the past several months on doing some big upgrades and stuff and kind of getting ready for their second league launch. And when it comes out, I'm going to jump right back in and play it even more. There's so much to love about this game. I love the characters. I love the fact that each skill that you equip has its own skill tree, so you can go in and heavily customize that skill. There's some cool combos, very cool spell effects and visuals for the game. The classes are really cool. There's just a lot to love about Last Epoch, and just kind of like, at the moment, I would say, even with Path of Exile 2, it's my number 1 ARPG for right now. I've got a lot of issues with Path of Exile 2 that I'm sure they will fix and patch out. And I think that eventually Path of Exile 2 is going to beat out Last Epoch for me. But honestly, I'm more excited to play the next league of Last Epoch than I am any other ARPG that's out right now. And that's kind of surprising to me. I didn't think that'd be the case. I thought I'd be playing Path of Exile nonstop. This isn't going to be a what's wrong with Path of Exile video, but it is a how good is Last Epoch that it made number 1 for me for 2024. So that's a wrap for me for 2024. There are a lot of games that are missing from this list. Many of them I did not play or get a chance to play this year, and that's probably why a lot of them aren't on the list. There's a couple I did get a chance to play, but for me, they just didn't make the list. You know, I played Metaphor, but honestly, for me, it doesn't beat Grand Blue Fantasy, and it doesn't beat Romancing Saga 2. And that's kind of a surprise, but also not really a surprise. I don't know. I struggle to get into Atlas games. There's just a lot of stuff that's come out that didn't make the list or I didn't get to play. So let me know in the comments section below, what was your top game of 2024? And if there's a game that you're wondering, like, hey, why didn't this make the list? Let me know, and I'll try to respond and tell you why. It might be as simple as, oh, I didn't get to play that yet. So we'll see. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed your gaming over 2024. I hope you've enjoyed the content I've put out here on the channel, and you're looking forward to what's coming up in 2025. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, subscribe, all that kind of jazz. Thanks for taking the time to watch one of my videos, and I'll see you on the next one.